So tonight we have Kathleen Rust, who is a PhD candidate researching early primate evolution and systematics at the University of Kansas Biodiversity University and Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology. She earned her MA in anthropology from Hunter College City University in New York. She worked as a biological anthropology educator at the American Museum of Natural History. As a doctoral student, she conducts paleontological fieldwork, collecting mammal fossils from the late Paleocene rock formations in Wyoming and Eocene rock formations in Turkey. By studying the fossils of early primates and the genomes of living mammals, her research explores adaptiform systematics, and her dissertation research investigates the purported evolutionary trade-off between vision and olfaction in early primate evolution. In addition to research, Kathleen remains active in outreach and education for local audiences through the University of Kansas Museum of Natural History and Biodiversity Institute. And with that, Kathleen.
Well, thank you for that lovely, thorough introduction. I appreciate it. That was a lot. Thank you very much for having me this evening. I am really delighted to be here. I'm always delighted when people want to talk primate evolution and paleontology with me. So it's a real pleasure to be here. And I first learned about the ESCONI Club when I participated in a program at the Burpee Museum just this past March called PaleoFest, and I met some members there. Delighted to get to know them, and they were kind enough to extend an invitation to give a talk with you all tonight. So yeah, thank you so much for having me. Before I talk about some of these extinct primate species that I study, I first want to acknowledge and thank not only my home institution, the University of Kansas, and a lot of my funding sources, like my fellowship here at KU, the Madison and Lila Self-Graduate Fellowship, external and other internal grants and funders, but also my collaborators and colleagues, my advisor, my lab mates. Science, as you all know, is a collaborative process, and without my lab mates and collaborators, none of this science would be possible. So I just want to acknowledge and thank them first and foremost. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. So I have been studying primates, their evolutionary history, their origins, their biogeography, for over 10 years now. I am captivated by their beautiful diversity, and I think it's important to study primates because we are ourselves primates. And this is one of my favorite collages to place up in a talk because it really captures the beautiful diversity, morphological complexity, and just different life histories that our living primate relatives live today. And it's unfortunate because more than half, I would say about more than 75% of our living primate relatives today are threatened with extinction. And that is due to a number of factors, but the most prevalent factor is habitat loss through climatic and environmental changes that are predominantly fueled by human activity. So in order to make the best and most educated, informed decisions about how to preserve the beautiful biodiversity that we see in our living primate relatives, we need to look to their past. And reading the primate fossil record is the best way to inform ourselves of how our extinct primate relatives responded to and adapted or overcame environmental changes and climatic fluctuations in the past. So reading the fossil record of our primate relatives of the ancient past will help preserve our primate biodiversity today and in the future as we experience climate change today. So all of my interests in primate evolution in primate origins throughout my undergraduate and master's career ushered me to the position I have today as a PhD candidate studying primate evolution in the Beard Lab. This is a nice shot of some of my colleagues. I figured I'd tell you all a little bit about myself and some of the work that my lab, the research agenda of my lab, really focuses on. We are a predominantly mammalian. We are a Cenozoic mammalian paleontology lab. I know that in Northern Illinois, you have a lot of Paleozoic, not much Cenozoic or Mesozoic, really. So I'm going to be talking to you a lot about some mammals from the Paleocene and the Eocene, which unfortunately aren't in your state, but they're not much here either. But we go across the world to find some of these mammals. So we have collaborated with a lot of different institutions and researchers. For example, we are actively looking fossil prospecting for mammals and other vertebrates at some late Paleocene localities here. I wonder if one moment, if I can get a pointer, that would be great. How do I thought I had a pointer. Oh, what happened to there? Excuse me, sorry, technical difficulties. Anyways, this picture right up here in the upper right corner, this is a group shot of some of our collaborators at the University of Washington, geologists and other paleontologists, and we are looking for some fossil mammals in southern Wyoming, south central Wyoming, and some late Paleocene sites. This shot here at the bottom right corner, this is an international team of paleontologists and geologists here in Ankara in Turkey on our day off from looking for Middle Eocene and Brithopod fossils and mammals in central Anatolia during the Middle Eocene, and during a time that was really actually pretty tectonically complex, and we're seeing a lot of cool island kind of biogeography there and some cool colonization patterns from other mammals. So we have a pretty broad mammalian paleontological research agenda. And just to give you a snapshot of what our lab does, this is one of our beautiful sites out in south central Wyoming, where we are supported by the Davy B. Jones Foundation to look for some primate-like little critters and other mammals that existed about I would say 57, 58 million years ago during the latest Paleocene. Now, unlike some of the big Jurassic, Triassic, dinosaur paleontological excavations that they're using a big pickaxes and tractors and a lot of plaster, when we're looking for some Mesozoic early Cenozoic mammals, we are often on our hands and knees, on our bellies, crawling around looking for these tiny micro mammal fossils. So it's not the big, sexy dinosaur pickaxe plaster kind of scenario. We're scurrying around on the ground. And in fact, if we come across a fossil site that is particularly fossiliferous, we'll bag up a lot of sediment and carry it back to the nearest waterway and actually sieve and kind of like pan for fossil gold. And we actually will screen wash for fossils. And just to give you an idea, this is a huge fossil for some of our sites out in south central Wyoming. I believe that this is, you're looking at a partial dentary or lower jaw of, I want to say that's Plesiadopus, a primate-like little critter that was really thriving in the latest Paleocene of Wyoming. And then these are some shots from our fieldwork that we do in Turkey. So we are working in central Anatolia, so central Turkey. And our sites range from the earliest to about Middle Eocene. And we have found some really fascinating larger bodied mammals, a lot of embrithopod fossils, which are convergent on rhinos. They have this really large, big appearance. And just last year, we found the first micro mammal fossil from that same embrithopod site. So really looking forward to going back to Turkey and finding more fossils to tell us more about the faunal exchange between some of these disparate land masses, given the geographic landscape at the time. So we look for these fossils. A lot of our field season is during the summer. In fact, in about 3 weeks, I'll be setting off to Wyoming. We do our heyday of paleontological, not research, but field work is in the summer. So once we're back in the lab, what are we doing with these fossils? What kind of questions are we asking, or what kind of information can we glean from these fossils? So the main research agenda, we're interested at, myself and my lab mates, we are interested in reconstructing the evolutionary history of a lot of these fossil groups that have either living descendants or maybe are the precursors of living groups today. So we're interested in how certain species are related to one another, and we can reconstruct those evolutionary relationships between groups using fossils. And typically people today that are interested in reconstructing evolutionary relationships, they can take DNA from living organisms and reconstruct evolutionary relationships in this way by seeing how similar or dissimilar the DNA, the nucleotide sequences are between two species. And so with that, this is a radial phylogeny here on the left that is generated from assessing and analyzing the molecular DNA. And unfortunately, Jurassic Park really oversold the idea of dinosaur DNA. DNA does not preserve that to that late in the fossil record. So as paleontologists, we are constrained to the fossils and analyzing their anatomy, their morphology, in order to reconstruct these evolutionary relationships. Now, when I say these evolutionary relationships, you can consider it like a family tree. So the closer two individuals are on a tree, the more recent common ancestor they have. So we can use the hard part morphology from these fossils to determine how closely or distantly related two extinct primate species are to each other and to other living groups. But again, we are constrained to only using their anatomy. And what's cool about understanding the evolutionary relationships of extinct primates, it can reciprocally inform the biogeography of primates as well in the ancient past. And biogeography of extinct primates can reciprocally reinform the evolutionary relationships of primates as well. It's a really beautiful interplay between these two kinds of lines of evidence to reconstruct an evolutionary history or narrative of an entire group. So for example, you can see that the species here, Tylohardina crassidens and Teutonius matthewi, are the most closely related, and they have another distant cousin here. And the distribution of these species mirrors their evolutionary relatedness. So the biogeography of how close or disparate two species are across a landscape can also inform how maybe closely evolutionary related they are. And we can infer dispersal patterns across time and space by reconstructing evolutionary relationships as well. So it's a really beautiful dance between these two lines of evidence that we can glean from fossils and where they occur in time and space. And so that's kind of the broad research agenda of our lab. And with that, we also like to understand how large environmental, global scale environmental changes like climatic changes or environmental changes affect that evolutionary history as well. So I've been talking about primates, but what makes a primate, and how are paleontologists even able to discern a primate fossil from maybe a rodent fossil, for example? So there are a suite of features that are commonly used to identify a primate, anatomical features, that is. For example, primates all have forward-facing eyes, and we actually even have a bony ring or a bony plate that encases the sides of our eyes, really highlighting how heavily we have invested in the sense of vision as the primate, as a lineage. We also have relatively large brains relative to body size. There is often small litter sizes, small litter sizes, typically 1 to only a handful of offspring, and a lot of gestational development and maternal investment after birth. And then finally, we also have grasping hands and feet and nails instead of claws. Now, how many of these features can you find in the fossil record? Well, you can mark off gestation length. You can mark off relative brain size unless you get an entire skull that is so perfectly preserved. A lot of these features, you're kind of, for lack of a better phrase, SOL, unless you find a completely preserved, beautiful skeleton. Now, fortunately, being a mammalian paleontologist, mammal teeth are excellent diagnostic anatomical elements. Finding a mammal tooth whenever you're fossil prospecting is kind of like finding a fingerprint at a crime scene. Because mammals have complex teeth, unlike crocodiles. If you think of a big crocodile eating something, it just has peg-like teeth that can be constantly replaced. Mammals have really complex and different kinds of teeth. We have incisors and canines in the front of our mouths, and we have premolars and molars. And so if you take your tongue and you slide your tooth along the you slide your tongue along the chewing surface of those teeth, you'll feel all of these bumps and ridges and crests, and all of those features are anatomical morphological traits of a tooth. And we can understand not only what an organism ate, but we can understand what species it is based on the organization of those bumps and crests and tiny little teeth. So just as an example, here is a Mesozoic mammal, an earlier kind of mammal that has a lot of complicated teeth. And here is an occlusal view, a diagram of those teeth. So this is looking at the chewing surface of these upper teeth. And you'll notice that these bumps and ridges all have names. So you have a pericone, metacone, protocone. This is a very standard, what we call tribosphenic molar morphology. So this is kind of like the essential bowel plan, or like the kind of blueprint of a mammal tooth. And based on the configuration of all of these bumps and crests, again, we can diagnose a species. So take a look at the Canalestes upper molar and compare it to an early primate, this one in particular, Amomes. You can see what different features have shifted, maybe become inflated, what cusps have been gained or lost. So as a mammalian paleontologist, primate teeth are fossil gold, and we can glean a lot of information from them. Species, what kind of diet they consumed, even how large they were. If you have multiple canines, for example, from a mammal species that differ in size, you can even determine social and mating system by the degree of sexual dimorphism in their canine sizes. So there's a lot to be celebrated with fossil teeth. I'm here to tell you that fossil teeth are very important. I never pictured myself studying fossil teeth as a paleontologist, but here we are. So the fossil teeth of the earliest primates comes in 2 kinds of flavors. So the very earliest primates, we have the Adaphiform primates here on the left and the Oomamaiform primates on the right. And the Adaphiform primates are more lemur-like in their morphology. And you can tell that these different groups of these two of the earliest primates, there's some like pretty noticeable or discernible features. Adaphiforms are slightly larger. They probably moved around their environments a little different. And so postcranially, that is in the skeleton under the skull, their features in their arm and leg, feet and hand bones slightly differ from the smaller Oomamaiform primates, which are more tarsier-like in their anatomy. Now, I'm not sure if you've ever seen a tarsier. I like to call them the pugs of the primate world. They have these huge eyes, and in fact, one orbit of a tarsier is actually larger than its own brain. Tarsiers are the weirdest primate anomalies. They're fascinating, and I hope to study them more in the future. Anyways, Oomamaiforms are considered kind of like a weird precursor to tarsiers, and they have a lot of features that are similar to tarsiers, maybe moved around similar to them, vertical clinging and leaping, but they have larger eyes than Adapiforms and a slightly shorter muzzle and differences in their teeth as well that we can discern from Adapiforms. And here are some really beautiful, lively reconstructions of some of these primates. So does anyone want to take a guess what kind of primate this is on the left?
That's the adapting.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, the Adapiforms, right. These are the lemur-like Adapiforms here. You're looking at two Gnatharctid Adapiforms somewhere in North America. And then here on the right are the cute little Omomyiforms. This is a particular species. This paleoartistic reconstruction is of a little critter known as Shoshonius. So a lot of fun primate words.
See the eyes, she said the eyes are almost bigger than the brain. The eye hole.
Excuse me? Oh, okay. So, all right. So with that, now that we're all primed all about primates, let's talk about primate fossils and some of the species I have been studying. And to give us that, to segue us into that discussion, let's talk first about what did the Earth look like when the earliest primates actually evolved and originated? Well, a lot of mammals, including the first members of some of the modern orders, mammalian orders that we know and love today, first appeared roughly about 10 million years after the extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs. So roughly about 55 million years ago, we see the first primates. And this is what the Earth looked like around that time. So you can see some resemblance to what the Earth looks like today, but the continents are not anywhere near their modern day positions. In fact, there is a large seaway that is still separating Africa from most of Eurasia, the Tethys Seaway. There is another huge seaway that is interrupting a lot of the now continuous landscape of most of Europe. And in fact, if you look where modern day Turkey is, you see why there's a lot of really interesting island biogeographic research that's being done in this area. And India is just beginning to collide with Asia and starting to form the Himalayas. And in fact, it looks like South America and Africa are still rifting further and further apart. And there's still no connection between South America and North America. However, there are some intermittent connections between North America and Asia. And in fact, it is these connections between these two land masses at this time during the Eocene and the environmental and climatic conditions that really facilitated the radiation, evolution, and dispersal of a lot of primate and other mammalian groups. So just to give you an idea of what some of those temperatures would have been like to facilitate that dispersal, this graph here on the left is showing paleo temperature. And this boundary between this period of time called the Paleocene and the Eocene, this boundary is referred to as the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. That was, and it resulted in this huge and dramatic spike in temperature, allowing primates that typically we understand live in kind of, they're thermophilic. They love, they're equator bound. They love tropical kinds of landscapes. We were finding primates at that point were able to go up latitudinally as far as the Arctic Circle, even in the Paleocene. My lab mate Kristen Miller, just published some really interesting Plesiadapiform fossils from the Arctic Circle called from Ellesmere Island. So this was a period of intense global warming, and it made really what we consider inhospitable landscapes today, like the Badlands of Wyoming, South Dakota, Montana, really subtropical kind of lush environments, and allowed the dispersal again of primates into high latitudinal regions that we wouldn't expect them today. So I love this paleoartistic reconstruction of what the Bighorn Basin around 55 million years ago would have looked like. And this right here on the right, you see a troop of Cantius, and then there is some Diacodexis, artiodactyl, basal artiodactyls here. Here are some condylarths, and then this is a mesonychid, another condylarth, and then a troop or a group of Hyracotherium. There was a lot of beautiful diversity that supported not only primates, but a lot of early basal members of other modern mammalian orders at this time. So life during the Eocene, it was really great. Temperatures were warm, tropical, lush environments, and we see for the first time primates in North America, Europe, and Asia at this time. They have this holarctic distribution, but they were really thriving in parts of North America. And in fact, adaphiform primates radiate into this beautiful diversity where there are almost, I think, like 27 species known alone of adaphiforms in North America alone. So during the Eocene, primates were thriving. However, this, tropical lush lifestyle does not last forever. The Eocene ends by the roughly around 34 million years ago, and this boundary between the Eocene and the Oligocene is known as the Eocene-Oligocene transition, from going from the greenhouse of the Eocene to really an ice house kind of climate in the Oligocene. So it's marked by a dramatic and abrupt drop in global temperature. And that's thought to occur because of the Arctic Oligocene glaciation that was released when Australia rifts from the rest of South America. And so we see a dramatic decrease in temperature, and the once tropical, lush kind of landscape that characterizes a lot of these higher latitudinal regions in North America, where we were finding beautiful primates, it is totally replaced by just grasslands. So all of the resources that these diverse primate communities were relying on and subsisting on during all of the Eocene are completely vanished and replaced by these grasslands. By the end of the Eocene, all primates in North America go extinct. Additionally, in Europe. By the end of the Eocene, as we enter the Oligocene and experience these really cold temperatures and that have dramatic effects on the environment, primates cannot adapt to these changing environments in North America and Europe. And so we see the extirpation of primates in this region. So now I've told you a little bit about the Eocene and how primates were relevant in North America. Enter the plot twist, Ekgmowechashala. So around in the 1960s, paleontological researchers were fossil prospecting in Oligocene rocks in the Great Plains area and came across this interesting critter. So this, what we're looking at here in the middle of the screen, is the upper molar of a primate species that is now known as Ekgmowechashala. Everybody say it with me, Ekgmowechashala. And researchers have known about it, like I said, since the 60s, where it was first discovered in South Dakota. And it was originally described as an omamaiform primate due to a number of dental features. However, not everybody was pleased with this diagnosis, because primates in America do not exist by the Oligocene. So these fossils right here are aged to about 29.5 million years old. So that is roughly 5 million years after the extinction of all other primates in the region. So how in the world how do we make sense of this primate species that is isolated in terms of time and space? There are no other primates in the region at the time. And where did it come from? Is this perhaps a late surviving relic of some of the adaphiform primates that had once thrived in North America? because we keep finding, after its initial discovery in South Dakota, other fossils of Ekgmowechashala were discovered from other Oligocene deposits in the John Day Formation in Oregon. And those are 27 million years old. So it had a decent time range here in North America. And in terms of its dental morphology, it has some dead giveaway primate features, but otherwise it's very unique in its morphology, dentally speaking. This upper molar here, you have a lot of crenulated enamel, just wrinkled enamel. You have a lot of these neomorphic cuspules here. Here is our big paracone. You see the metacone, and this is the protocone. Again, that classic kind of tribosphenic molar morphology, but you've got a bunch of these other new weird cuspules that don't even have names, and it's just unique in its morphology. So it's a very funky primate in terms of where it's found, in terms of time and space, and in its anatomy. Because I'll tell you one thing, there's no Neotharctid or other Adapiform primate that existed in North America in the Eocene that has teeth like this. So this is a line drawing of a lower premolar and a lower molar right here in the lower right corner. And then the upper molars were found from Oregon. And so based on this funky appearance, ever since the 1960s, when Ekgmowechashala was first described as an omomyiform primate, researchers had debated if it was an omomyiform, if it was an adapiform, heck, if this thing was even a primate, because there are no other primate fossils existing, or there are no other primate fossils found from any of these formations or localities at the time. So, and this is a very cute earlier reconstruction of what Ekgmowechashala may have looked like. And just to answer now, all we have of Ekgmowechashala are fossil teeth. We can estimate body mass based on taking some linear measurements of molars to estimate body mass. We can have an idea of what this critter may have looked like. And just based on body size and just other extant living primate behavior, we can make really cool ideas and hypothesize via these paleoartistic reconstructions. So this is a little nocturnal Ekgmowechashala nibbling on some nuts, which I'll get into a little bit later, talking about its diet. So for a long time, Ekgmowechashala had been debated, and there wasn't really a lot of resolution. The jury was still out. So then so again, a lot of people considered it to be an omomyiform, maybe a dermopteran, a flying lemur. Extinct groups that eventually gave rise to flying lemurs, or an adapiform. So the jury was out for a long time, until in the 1990s, my advisor here at the University of Kansas, Chris Beard, and his colleagues were fossil prospecting in Guangxi, China, in southern China, and came across this upper molar that you see in the upper left-hand corner. Does that remind you of anything? Have we seen fossils that look similar to this fossil? Well, when they picked up these fossils, and this is a shot of them prospecting in China, again, on all fours, just like we do, looking for micro mammals. And when my advisor and his collaborators first found this jaw, they thought, oh my God, what is Ekgmowechashala doing here in China? And they thought how closely similar, how strikingly similar the morphology of this very unique primate from North America was to this fossil that they picked up from China. And to be clear, the age of the rock formations that they were fossil prospecting in China, they were in the Baisa Basin, looking at the Nadua Formation, which is about middle to late Eocene. So about 45 to 35 million years old, even though that's a pretty large gap. But so these Chinese fossils were collected in the 90s, and just like many fossils, they sit in collections and museums. They gather dust, and then they reach peak vintage until a curious graduate student comes across it and decides, hey, maybe this will be part of my dissertation. So I decided to, for my research that I conducted, to test the hypothesis, are Palaeohodites, this Chinese specimen from Guangxi, China, and Ekgmowechashala closely related, given how morphologically and anatomically similar they are? In addition, these are the other, you're looking at the lower jaw here, other lower jaw fragments of Palaeohodites, what we decided to name this this assemblage of Chinese fossils. So we wanted to test this hypothesis. We know that we have a new primate species in China, but could it shed light on the evolutionary history of Ekgmowechashala? Are they closely related? Could this solve the mystery origin story of Ekgmowechashala? Because some of the features that were striking to us that we first noticed was the heavily crenulated enamel, the same neomorphic cuspules, and particularly this right here in Ekgmowechashala, we see this protocone, and just distal to it, we see this other cuspule. Now that's interesting, and some other researchers had diagnosed that as being a pseudohypocone, which is a whole other can of worms that I won't get into it here. But look at right here. This protocone has another accessory cusp that's almost twinned with it. So it looks duplicated in appearance. And so this fossil from China that we named Palaeohodites has this duplicated protocone, which we considered maybe that's a morphological precursor to Ekgmowechashala in North America. So what I did in order to test this hypothesis, I collected morphological data from a number of different adaphiform primate teeth, and I performed a phylogenetic analysis to reconstruct the evolutionary relationships of these fossils. So in 2016, my advisor and his collaborators were doing a different analysis, but had incorporated data from Ekgmowechashala into this larger analysis and found an interesting relationship, an interesting evolutionary clade here, where Ekgmowechashala was closely related to a lot of other Asian adaphiform primates. So for my for the current study, we tested this hypothesis by looking at the teeth of a ton of adaphiform species to see if Ekgmowechashala would group among the North American adaphiforms or the European adaphiforms, or perhaps the Asian adaphiforms, like some others had hinted just a few years prior. And wouldn't you know, so this is the evolutionary tree that the morphological data I collected and analyzed using a computer, a model of evolution and an algorithm to generate this tree. And my analysis found with overwhelmingly positive statistical support that not only Ekgmowechashala and this Chinese taxon Palaeohodites are closely related, out of all of the species I tested, they are the most closely sister related. So with a bootstrap support value of 99%. Typically with paleontological data, when we resample and perform bootstrapping analyses to test how biologically sound and truthful are these evolutionary trees that we generate, we resample using a number of statistical procedures to say, hey, that's not a really good that's not a statistically sound or supported evolutionary tree you have there. But all of our statistical support for this evolutionary relationship that we recovered based on this paleontological data was so well supported with numbers that we were very eager to see. So in fact, given that we have found, again, this group of primate species in Asia being so closely clustered and evolutionary related, to Ekgmowechashala, we erected a new family of Adipiforms called Ekgmowechashalidae and a subfamily called Ekgmowechashalinae. So what does this tell us? Let's put this all into context now. We've got time and space and fossils and evolutionary relationships and algorithms and software. What does all of this tell us? Well, our results show that 50 million years ago, before Ekgmowechashala existed in North America, primates were thriving in the Holarctic, in North America, Europe, and Asia. And then by the Oligocene, where we have the replacement of tropical lush landscapes with grasslands, we see the extirpation or the extinction of all primates in North America and Europe, with only surviving Adipiform primates occurring in Asia. And by the end of the Oligocene, we have Garanthropus, Muangtunhideus, and Bugti lemur able to survive and weather the conditions brought on by the Eocene Oligocene cooling event, because they were able to retreat to regions of lower latitude and evade those cold weather conditions. So around 34 million years ago, we don't have Ekgmowechashala yet, but Palaeohodites is still existing. I'm not sure if I'd go to say thriving, but Palaeohodites is existing at this time of intense, dramatic environmental change and cooling in Asia. Now, by 28 million years ago, where we have established Ekgmowechashala, it is easy to understand how Palaeohodites was directly ancestral to and gave rise to the lineage that was able to evade cold weather conditions and travel across Beringia via these intermittent land connections, and especially with lowered sea levels during glaciation, and it was able to make its way into North America. Again, seeing how these beautiful lines of evidence, evolutionary relationships, and dispersal patterns and biogeography can reciprocally inform one another and help us understand the earliest chapters of primate evolutionary history. So, some last remarks. Primates were thriving during the Eocene when it was a hospitable environment in most places that we wouldn't expect to find primates. However, climatic events robbed them of their habitats in North America and Europe. So what we can take away from our interpretation of the fossil record and how we have interpreted this evolutionary story helps inform our conservation efforts. We know primates need to retreat to other habitats or other regions within their temperature gradient to be able to subsist and maintain survivalhood. So we can take directly what we have found from the fossil record and apply it to our conservation efforts. One other remark I'd like to say about Ekgmowechashala and Palaeohodites is that Ekgmowechashala, in all technical terms, is considered a Lazarus taxon, which you may be asking, what is a Lazarus taxon or the Lazarus phenomenon? Over here we have a beautiful Renaissance kind of mural of Lazarus, who is risen from the dead. And it's this idea that the Lazarus phenomenon is whenever you find a taxon that you once thought was totally extinct in a region and you find it again. So by all technical terms, Ekgmowechashala is considered the Lazarus taxon of primates in North America before the arrival of Homo sapiens. So Ekgmowechashala lives only briefly and in a very, I think, inhospitable landscape during the Oligocene of North America. So I have a lot of appreciation and respect for this extinct little critter that could tell us so much about how we can preserve its living descendants. And I know that human evolution is very sexy and cool, and Neanderthals and Australopiths are very, very cool, and everybody can relate to them a little bit more. And I get that the fervor and enthusiasm for primate evolution recedes as you get further away from the hominins, but I think it's really captivating and a fascinating story to understand and to be able to know how our earliest ancestors were able to survive and give rise to our lineage eventually. So with that, I hope that I have satiated your mammalian paleontological appetite, and I will take any questions.
That was amazing. Yeah. So, question, are there living ancestors of the one from, and I'm not even going to try to say the name because I'm going to mess it up, but the one from China, are there, any living?
So I wish, and so based on this evolutionary tree right here, where you see Chevaladapids is one group of extinct Asian adapiforms, and so are Ekgmowechashalids now. And unfortunately, they're nested within adapiformes. So all adapiform primates, unfortunately, they have no living descendants. They are most often grouped within Strepsirini. So that's the group that includes living lemurs, lorises, and galagos. And a lot of people have, or many researchers have hypothesized some kind of direct lineage, ancestor-descendant relationship between adapiforms and modern strepsirines, but it's definitely a little bit more complicated than that. There are some adapiform primates that likely were not directly ancestral to living lemurs in that group. So there are I think that there are over 260 different adapiform primates known total throughout all of the Eocene and Oligocene. So not all of them are directly ancestral. Again, evolution is not one beautiful linear line. It's rather, our family tree isn't even really a tree. It's more of like a bush. It's very bushy with a lot of branches that terminate into nothing. So
Very cool. That's a lot of work. I mean, people don't realize how much work is involved to make that very nice, easy to see and understand. Chart.
So
That's
the
a lot of work.
So the primates that were found in the Green River Formation, would they be categorized under the no, I won't even try.
Ekgmowechashala. Yeah, we can go together. Ekgmowechashala.
Ekgmowechashala.
There you go, exactly. And actually, I should say Ekgmowechashala, it was discovered by this paleontologist MacDonald in 1960, and it was found at the Wounded Knee site, so near the Sioux Reservation in South Dakota. And Ekgmowechashala in the Sioux language means little cat man, because they had no name for monkey in Sioux, so they chose the closest thing to it. So that's kind of the origin of the etymology of Ekgmowechashala.
What was found in the Green River? I thought there were several primates found in the Green River Formation.
So I know that my colleague Matt Jones has studied a lot of Green River Formation bats, and it's a lot of early Eocene stuff. There are tons of primates from the early Eocene Green River Formation, but Ekgmowechashala occurs in much later formations than the Green River. So Green River Formation, to my knowledge, extends well into the Eocene, and so there are, again, just like I said, over 260 kind of adapiform species that lived during the Eocene, and Omomyiforms aren't even included in that number. But there was a beautiful diversity of the earliest primates during the Eocene that just thrived all over North America.
And then it came to an end.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, then, the Garden of Eden.
Do they know yet how the temperatures rose so much in the Eocene?
Yes. So they believe, so the Paleocene Eocene thermal maximum was induced by a gradual rise in just temperature, and then it caused this positive feedback loop where it melted phosphate carbon ice reservoirs in the sea. And then it just, and it was this positive feedback loop that allowed for the excursion of all of this CO2, which then was just, again, refueled and brought to a head this dramatic exponential increase in temperature at this time that lasted. I think the Paleocene Eocene thermal maximum itself is like a 200,000 year interval. They're able to get to that degree of resolution. And I'm sorry, I butchered my explanation. It's these trying to get to the carbon isotope excursion that allowed for this dramatic. It was a gradual natural increase in temperature. You can see here that there is a steady rise, and then exponentially, this is a period that lasts for about 200,000 years. And it's those phosphate reservoirs on the sea floors that were then melting and then producing extra CO2, which caused, again, this positive feedback loop of this paleontological isotope excursion of carbon. I think you're muted.
Could we be getting set up for another incursion like that? I know that there's pools of methane that are trapped in the seafloor, but
That's what I'm saying, not phosphate, methane. That's what I meant to say. Yes, that's exactly, yes, you are absolutely right. And yes, we could, I mean, I should go ahead, we're recording here. I am not a climate scientist. I'm a paleontologist. I look at fossil bones, but I think it's really important to understand how to interpret paleo temperature data and geologic data to be able to coincide and understand how these climatic and environmental events can influence, these extinct lineages. But I myself am not a climate scientist.
I'm just curious, in looking at this, were there any major eruptions that also happened at the same time that could have exacerbated the heat?
I don't know. I can't think of any off the top of my head. That's not to say that there weren't any, but no, not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. And why do you think there is a lack of fossils? I mean, we know we can find fossils of other animals and mammals, but all we have are teeth. Why do you think there is that? Do you think they're we just haven't found them? Or is there another reason why they didn't fossilize the other bones?
So I meant to say this during my my ode to mammal teeth. Enamel is the hardest element in our body. It's the hardest material. It's and so that is very conducive for the preservation of skeletal material. So this coating of enamel that we have on our teeth naturally is like a natural preservative and is naturally conducive for fossilization. So we tend to find more teeth just because they fossilize so much better and easier than other elements in the skeleton. That's not to say that we don't find fossil bones, but a lot of the fossil teeth that we're finding are so small. Other bones are going to be even smaller, and sometimes there's just a preservational bias against and for certain anatomical elements. We find a lot of like finger bones of larger mammals, a lot of distal phalanxes. And in fact, what's funny is that lower jaws preserve much better than upper jaws for some reason, which I've always found very interesting. And additionally, as far as, rock formations and where they exist and where they don't exist, I wish that I could have a beautiful Eocene, Oligocene, rock formation gradient all the way crossing Beringia to go and find myself some gradually maybe evolving Ekgmowechashalids making their way into North America. But unfortunately, those rocks don't exist in that, in the, theoretical dispersal route that I imagine Palaeohodites or Ekgmowechashala took. And Palaeohodites, we named Palaeohodites naduensis. My advisor and I named the Chinese fossil that his collaborators and himself found. Palaeohodites means ancient wanderer. So it's the ancient disperser. So we thought that that was very fitting for the evolutionary story that comes with Palaeohodites and Ekgmowechashala.
Yeah, it's fascinating that it was able to travel from China back.
And actually, yes, that is what another thing. The tooth morphology of Ekgmowechashala, again, I cannot emphasize how funky and weird it is. And crenulated enamel and these big bulbous teeth, there are certain features that within teeth that have been linked to different kind of dietary behaviors. So wrinkled enamel and low bulbous cusps, big puffy teeth like this, are often associated with hard object feeding. So if you think about Palaeohodites in the Eocene, having already evolved this weird kind of funky teeth to subsist on whatever hard food objects it was already consuming in the Eocene, I don't want to say pre-adapted, but it was primed to deal with the consequences of the Eocene, Oligocene glaciation event and cooling. Because while all of the primates that were subsisting on flowers, fruits, gums from trees that were then replaced with grasslands, their food resources, their dietary behaviors couldn't adapt, and their food resources disappeared. So they were left with nothing. So Palaeohodites was not necessarily pre-adapted to deal with this event, but already had the morphological adaptations to deal with the consequences to facilitate not only its survival, but then dispersal into North America, where it came across a desolate landscape, but was probably subsisting on other hard food objects there. So its tooth morphology, we think, was it enhanced its survival, just like all the small mammals did during the mass extinction event that took out the dinosaurs. The asteroid impact took out these large-bodied terrestrial vertebrates, whereas small-bodied little mammals that could burrow could evade those conditions brought on by the asteroidal impact. So it's these really cool biological features that maybe are seemingly random during the Eocene, but that could be very, very suitable for you during the Oligocene.
So did the ecological conditions that were favorable for the primates in North America, did those simply move farther south as the climate cooled?
Sorry, you broke up a little bit on my end. I don't know if that was, could you say that again?
Okay, did the ecological conditions that were favorable for primates in North America prior to the cooling, did that simply move farther south? In other words, do you have the conditions, say, down in Mexico, where you could have a relic population of primates that actually you might have them as the precursor for both of the species or the genera that you're talking about, and it's not that anything came across Beringia, because I'm really skeptical about anything coming across Beringia during that cooling period, and having to live off of seeds that would have been foreign to it, and this whole the whole scenario here. I'm skeptical.
I appreciate and respect the skepticism, and I have a book recommendation for you as well. If you're interested in biogeography and dispersal of invertebrates, botanical specimens, and vertebrates, there is a really great book by, I can't remember his first name, De Caros, and it's called The Monkey's Voyage. And it explains the most truly unbelievable dispersal events, but that are supported by scientific data, whether it is geological, molecular, or paleontological or tectonic. even. And he does an incredible job of, and in very user-friendly, accessible language of explaining how, and it gives a history too of the scientists involved in some of these debates before tectonics was actually ever really truly accepted as a theory. He explains in different chapters all of these unbelievable, miraculous kinds of dispersal events that explains the distribution of living species today and how they could have occurred in the past. And actually, the species that occur of living primates today in South America, they are most closely related outside of each other to those in Africa. All primates evolved originally somewhere in Asia, and then there are these incredible dispersal events via rafting of primates. And I know it sounds wild, but especially the primates, the primate fossil record of Africa, of the Middle Eocene, the closest, there are also similar age, slightly younger, found in South America, and they are dead ringers for those in Africa. And phylogenetic analyses support wholeheartedly those evolutionary relationships. So these primates are able to, and other vertebrates and invertebrates are able to make these miraculous journeys. So that is a book I definitely recommend. And it's not like primates like are rafting together in this. They are. Oh my gosh. There is active dispersal, and then there is vicariant dispersal. Vicariance, where you are moving on a landmass, either tectonically over a very long period of time, or in the event of like large hurricane, tsunami, not tsunami, but like hurricane weather events, where you see riverbanks, parts of the vegetation break off from riverbanks with trees and all of the organisms that are home, that tree is home to, across and downstream. And so yeah, I know it's an unbelievable journey to think about Palaeohodites or a little Ekgmowechashala making its way across Beringia. It's almost nearly as unbelievable as primates existing in the Arctic Circle and having to adapt to an Arctic light cycle too. But somehow miraculously, I don't mean to sound so cheesy, but life finds a way. So
It's a good line for a movie.
So,
What was the name of the book again?
excuse me?
Part-
What was the name of the book again?
It is called The Monkey's Voyage.
Okay.
I will get to your question. I'm just very passionate about that book and this topic. So yes, in all likelihood, they very well could have retreated to southern latitude or to lower latitudes in North America. However, if you're looking here at my screen, you'll see that North America and South America aren't connected. And then additionally, some of the rock formations that would preserve them aren't there. So it's not to say that they didn't, but there's been no other evidence. And also there's no more Ekgmowechashalids that have been found in any of those other later Oligocene rocks, nor are there any other ancestral types. Ekgmowechashala really truly occurs isolated in terms of time and space. There's no other relic or any other kind of stock from which it could have come in Mexico or North America, only from China that we know of. I mean, I am eager for someone to go find some other fossils that give another that tell another story. I would would be very eager and gladly entertain it, but that's just the these are the fossils that we have at this point, and
So is that how you were able to rule out convergent evolution, based on the fact that there's no other record that could support, them both developing, evolving in two different spaces?
And there are different ways in these computer algorithms to test how much homoplasy or convergence is actually being generated from your data matrix, and our levels of homoplasy to say like, hey, these are both independently evolved morphological features. We were not getting any indications of that. And to our knowledge, you know, we study a lot of primate fossils. Unless we go and look in every nook and cranny across the globe, there are no other fossil primates that are like this. So
Yeah, I don't doubt the dispersals and the mechanisms for them. I took biogeography in grad school, and I did my master's on Cretaceous mammals from southeast Montana. So I
okay.
am not far away from where you're working and what you're working on.
Yeah.
All that being said, I'm also aware that there are big gaps in the fossil record, and that you have a couple of what appear to be distant, or not distantly, appear to be related animals here that are separated by a large gap in time and geographically. And the only thing that binds them together is this area, which is quite difficult for them to get across. And I understand that's what the data supports, but evidence of absence is not, that phrase. So if you don't have the data, if you don't have data from areas in Mexico, which you don't have because of the geology, I mean, that's just the way it is. If you don't have that data, you work with what you've got, but you keep a healthy skepticism going just in case something comes up later on 10, 20, 100 years in the future and everything gets redone again. But that's how paleontology works.
Of course. And I get it. I hear you, man. You get what you get, and you don't get upset with the fossil record. It shows no mercy for you. But I would say, yes, these two species, they occur pretty disparately in terms of time and space. And I would totally agree with you that, yes, there are gaps in the fossil record. Maybe there is a reservoir or a stock of these primates in Mexico that we're just not seeing. However, our results are reinforced by the fact that Ekgmowechashala and Palaeohodites are so deeply nested within this Adapiform clade with other Asian species, really highlighting how Asia was this kind of refugium during the Eocene Oligocene transition, and Shivaladapids and other Asian Adapiforms are the only surviving Adapiforms after the Oligocene. Shivaladapids, in fact, survived well into the Miocene. So again, it's these evolutionary relationships, the fact that Ekgmowechashala and Palaeohodites are grouping and nesting so deeply within this clade of other Asian species leads me to accept this result and my interpretation of it as being, that it was this large biogeographic dispersal or this dispersal event from China into North America. That it's that